The year 2025 was supposed to be predictable. Awards, endorsements, event appearances, and the usual cycle of celebrity trends. But in the middle of an industry that rarely gets surprised anymore, two women managed to change the entire balance of power without ever announcing it. Becky and Freen had always been stars, but no one expected them to become the duo who would quietly shift the direction of the entire entertainment world. And the craziest part? They did it without trying to prove anything. They did it simply by being themselves, by being consistent, and by making moves so strategic that even the biggest agencies didn't see it coming until it was too late. It all started with a pattern fans noticed back in early 2025. Every project that featured the two of them, whether together or separately, started trending at a level that didn't make sense for ordinary media cycles. Streams surged overnight, brands fought for their availability, and international audiences began talking about them with an intensity that felt different this time. It wasn't just popularity anymore. It was influence. Fans began to say that there was something about Becky and Freen's presence that felt like they were building something bigger, something intentional. But the industry brushed it off. Many assumed it was just a wave of attention that would eventually fade. But it didn't. Instead, it grew. People began to wonder why the biggest fashion houses were suddenly prioritizing them over long-established stars. Why international event organizers were granting them headline placement usually reserved for global icons. And why producers who once hesitated were now the ones begging for their schedules. Something was happening behind the scenes, and fans sensed that Becky and Freen were no longer just actors or performers. They were becoming institutions. The turning point came when a high-ranking industry insider leaked a surprising detail to reporters. Becky and Freen had turned down a high-budget project not because they didn't like the script, but because they were working on something of their own, something big enough to require stepping back from offers other actors would kill to have. Rumors exploded instantly. Were they launching their own production label? Were they securing international distribution deals? Or was it something even bigger? No one had answers, but one thing was clear. The industry was quietly nervous. Agencies don't panic unless they feel a shift coming, and in this case, the shift was undeniable. If Becky and Freen were planning something independent, something outside the usual system, they could disrupt everything: casting power, brand value dynamics, media strategies. Because when two people gain enough influence, they no longer need the system. The system needs them. Then came the move that truly made the industry freeze. Without any official announcement, Becky and Freen started appearing at private meetings with executives known for building global careers. Meetings that were supposed to stay confidential until one small unnoticed photo surfaced online. A blurry shot of Becky holding a folder marked International Strategy, while Freen walked beside her, expression calm and focused. Fans immediately knew something was up. This was not a normal endorsement meeting. This was planning. Within weeks, media outlets started reporting that Becky and Freen were negotiating for creative control in all future projects. That meant no more limited screen time. No more typecasting. No more narratives forced by producers. They wanted to choose their stories, their directors, their teams, and they wanted to build something centered around authenticity and representation. And not representation as a marketing buzzword. Representation as the core. Industry watchers realized that if Becky and Freen secured that level of control, other actors might follow. And that would threaten the old structures, the structures that kept artists dependent on big agencies and traditional media power. But what shocked everyone even more was how calm the two women remained despite the intensity of speculation. Becky continued with her usual grounded presence. Freen continued with her quiet confidence. They never addressed the rumors, never defended themselves, never explained anything. That silence terrified the industry more than any statement could have. Silence meant certainty. Silence meant strategy. Then came the night that shifted everything. A major entertainment summit in 2025 had invited them as simple guests. But halfway through the event, the lights dimmed, and the host surprised the room by announcing a new segment titled The Next Era of Asian Entertainment. No one knew what was coming. Suddenly, the screen lit up with a reel, scenes from Becky and Freen's past projects, major award moments, iconic performances, interviews in different languages, fan events across multiple countries. But the reel didn't stop there. It transitioned to something shocking, a teaser clip of what looked like a completely new production, something high budget and international, something clearly independent. The screen showed the words created by followed by both their names. People gasped. Journalists jumped from their seats. Even industry executives looked stunned. The host then announced that Becky and Freen had secured an unprecedented global partnership that would allow them to develop, produce, and lead international projects under their own creative brand. The room erupted. The internet crashed. And within 1 hour, the phrase "the power shift" became the top trend worldwide. Their influence wasn't just about fame anymore. They had become visionaries, decision makers, and the blueprint for a new path in entertainment. The duo that once fought for opportunities now owned their future. Fans celebrated openly, praising their resilience, their kindness, and their refusal to let the industry define them. Celebrities sent private congratulations. Agencies panicked internally. Producers began rewriting their strategies. And while the world tried to adjust to the unexpected shift, Becky and Freen simply smiled and continued moving forward, proving that true power isn't loud. True power builds quietly, until it becomes too big to ignore. That is how Becky and Freen unexpectedly reshaped the entertainment world in 2025, changing the rules, changing the expectations, and showing everyone what it looks like when two women rise not because they push their way into a system, but because they built something strong enough to stand outside it. The news of Becky and Freen's quiet rise in the industry spread like wildfire, but what stunned people even more was how different their energy felt in 2025. For years they had been seen as rising stars, powerful individually, electrifying together, but suddenly, something had shifted. Their presence felt bigger. Their silence felt heavier. Their moves felt intentional. Producers whispered that the balance of power had changed. Brands were no longer chasing trends, they were chasing Becky and Freen. Directors admitted privately that scripts were being rewritten just to fit the dynamic they brought. Even networks had begun adjusting schedules around their availability. Something was happening, and everyone could feel it before they could explain it. It all began the night they attended a major industry event, walking in separately but somehow dominating the entire room. The cameras didn't even know where to point, at Becky, glowing and confident, or at Freen, calm and powerful with a new kind of certainty in her eyes. But it wasn't until halfway through the night that the shift became undeniable. A major international producer approached them, not separately, but together, requesting a private conversation. Witnesses who saw the moment said that Freen placed a subtle hand on Becky's back, guiding her forward with a kind of protectiveness the fandom wasn't used to seeing so openly. Becky, in return, stood taller, her expression steady, as if she already knew this moment would change something. Minutes later, the producer walked away looking both impressed and shocked, while Becky and Freen exchanged glances that said everything without saying anything at all. Rumors immediately swirled. Some said the two had just secured a project so big it would put them permanently on the global map. Some said it wasn't just one project, it was 3. Others insisted that the producer wanted to sign them as a duo, not just for one film or one series, but for a long-term contract that could reshape their entire careers. But the truth, the real truth, was even bigger. Behind the scenes, Becky and Freen had already started building something far beyond acting roles and endorsements. They were negotiating ownership. They were selecting scripts, not waiting for them. They were turning down offers that most actors would cry to receive. And the industry was beginning to understand why. Because the two of them were no longer just talents. They were becoming forces. And while people whispered about business deals and new opportunities, the fans noticed something much more delicate, much more intimate. How Freen had become more protective, more present, more grounded whenever Becky was around. How Becky had become more vocal, more assertive, more fearless in moments when Freen stood beside her. People wondered if the confidence boost came from success or from each other. But the real turning point came when a leaked clip from a private rehearsal surfaced online. It showed Becky practicing a major emotional scene while Freen watched from the side. At first it seemed normal, actors rehearse, others observe. But it was the moment after the scene ended that set the internet into a frenzy. Becky collapsed into tears from the weight of the performance, and before the director could even move, Freen crossed the room, took Becky's face in her hands, and whispered something only she could hear. Becky nodded. then buried her face into Freen's shoulder. Millions of fans replayed the clip. Cousins slowed it down, zoomed in, analyzed every breath, every blink. But the most unforgettable part was Freen's expression, steady, gentle, and fiercely protective. An expression that said, "I've got you," so clearly that no language barrier could hide it. People didn't need subtitles. They understood everything. What no one expected was that the clip, instead of being seen as a simple moment between co-stars, became the symbol of their power shift. Because behind the tears, behind the embrace, behind the whispered words, the world saw something rare, a partnership where neither outshined the other, where both lifted each other equally. Executives noticed. Directors noticed. The world noticed. And quietly, Freen and Becky began taking charge of their own careers in ways that were sending shockwaves everywhere. They refused projects that didn't respect them. They negotiated contracts that gave them creative voice. They turned down a major international brand because it conflicted with their values. And most of all, they stayed close no matter how intense the spotlight became. Their strength wasn't in their fame. It was in the way they moved together, protected one another, and made decisions that even the biggest names in entertainment were afraid to make. By mid-2025, the industry finally understood. Becky and Freen weren't just rising stars. They were becoming leaders, trendsetters, architects of their own path. The duo who could walk into a room and shift the entire atmosphere without speaking a word. And whether they intended to or not, they had changed the game.